We always hear about people that convert to Islam like Sinead O'Connor, Andrew Tate, Sneeko, and others. Then we have stories about the people who grift off Islam like Lily J, who feeds ChatGPT what she wants it to say about Islam, then uses that as propaganda to say Islam is true. However, we rarely hear about the other side of Islam, those who convert and leave. I myself am a convert to Sunni Islam. My wife was born and raised as a Christian, more or less, and then converted to Sunni Islam. Both of us left, and we talk about our experiences leaving Islam. But finding videos where ex converts openly talk about their experiences is like finding a needle in a haystack.
They told me that Islam was the answer to all of my problems. Everybody kept telling me it's because of the West why I had all these issues. Now I finally had a family. Now I finally had people to call my own. And very quickly, that all fell apart because the same community that welcomed me with open arms then decided to start judging me like crazy. I mean, my life actually got even worse at this point. I guess I always say Islam has a very good PR, has very good marketing, and it's very good at drawing people in, and it's very good at making a case for itself. But when you live the reality, it's a different story.
A friend sent me this video about a British woman named Ellie that converted to Islam, then left. In this video, my wife is going to react to her sharing her experiences as a Muslim, how she learned about Islam, and why she left. Ellie's story is full of gems for those who are going through similar. She's going to tell us how she got fooled by the Dawa lies of Islam. And you're definitely going to see the emotional growth she went through during this journey and how she was ultimately able to leave it and now speaks against it. I give you Mrs. Friendly Ex-Muslim reacting to Ellie's story of her leaving Islam.
These types of videos excite me. I feel like when I find videos like this and I watch them, I am watching a former version of myself, someone who also had these same exact experiences. I always find it incredibly fascinating that no matter where you go, whether it's somewhere in the United States, Canada, UK, or even Australia, all converts seem to share similar lived experiences as a Muslim. So today I am going to go through Ellie's story, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on her experience. As we explore this together, I'll share which of my experiences align with hers, and if I had similar feelings about Muhammad or the community as a whole. This is Ellie, and she is a former convert that lives in the UK. My curiosity was immediately piqued when she said she was a convert for many years. Honestly, I think any amount of time spent as a convert can provide valuable insight to those who are considering leaving or who have already left. But the longer you stay, the more insight you will have about what things are actually like in this religion. Let's get started with listening to Ellie's story.
I wanted to share my story because basically I am one of those people who, unfortunately for me, kind of had my own journey in and out of Islam. And I lived my life as a Muslim for a good amount of years. And then I left. And I just wanted to share my perspective because um, I think there's a great amount of like ex-Muslim stories where people have left and, these people were born into Islam. But there's also a percentage of people and, who convert to Islam and actually leave. But the Islamist propaganda is kind of like they like to pretend that so many people convert to Islam and then their lives are so much better. And
I do agree with her that Muslims are very good at showing people taking Shahada and joining, but there's never really much after that. No one really follows up with these converts 6 months, a year, or even 5 years down the road. We just see them being shown off in the masjid during Jummah prayer taking the Shahada. But we never see these people again. Sometimes it feels like converts are being mass produced, but what is the quality of something that is mass produced? Usually, it doesn't last. Let's analyze Ellie's conversion story and see what she has to say about it now, with the benefit of hindsight.
but I believe that probably is the case that some people have converted to Islam and they are very happy with their decision and they feel it was the right choice for them. But I wanted to share my story of how I felt that the decision I made was completely wrong. And it did negatively impact my life. I didn't find peace in it and I ended up leaving. And I just want to share my experience really and the reasons why I decided to leave, but also the reasons how I entered into the faith, because that's also important to discuss because not everyone enters into a religion for the right reasons. And it's something that I think should be avoided. So I'll quickly document my story and I will try my hardest to, um, explain kind of what happened to me and whatnot.
I would say that I have to agree with her when she says some converts are happy with their decision. Yes, this is true. Some converts do have a good experience and they commit to Islam until the end of their life. There are varying degrees of commitment, though. I knew someone who was a convert for over a decade, but she was a Quran only Muslim. She didn't believe in the Hadith, nor did she follow them. To be honest, if you are a Quranist Muslim, then you're not a mainstream Muslim, and they can make up Islam as they feel like. However, this person did have a Muslim husband and children, so take that for what you will. In a case like this, she will be, big finger quotes, Muslim, but not a truly practicing one. This same person I'm referring to also removed her hijab after many years of wearing it. I feel like a lot of Muslim women burn out from this religion over time, so they just kind of fall into being Muslim by name. They don't actually leave, they just kind of accept it as part of their life. It's not easy to leave and abandon the religion totally when you have a husband and kids, even if he's not very practicing himself. All right, let's continue.
Wait, before that, if you're liking this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you're new here. We're going to be uploading a lot more similar content in the near future, talking about Islam and social issues, and we'd like you to be a part of it. Back to the video.
So long story short, I grew up Catholic, and I actually grew up in a really tight-knit Catholic community in London. And I basically didn't really have any other friends of other faiths or family members. So it was just, everything was just Catholicism. As I said, I went to Catholic schools. And then when I was like, I think I was 16, I actually left the Catholic school system and I went to just a normal sixth form. And that's the first time I was ever introduced to Islam, because before then I just knew about it from like the news, unfortunately. Just like that kind of classic media coverage, especially growing up, in the kind of in the wake of 9/11, really, really kind of colored my view on Islam from that perspective. So I just thought it was something quite scary. And I didn't mix with Muslim people, so I had no idea what it was about. I just thought it was something that was quite controversial. My family had no issues with Islam, and but all we knew about, the only time we'd hear about it was like when there was a terrorist attack, which sounds terrible, but that's just how it was.
I can relate to her a little bit here. I grew up Lutheran, but I didn't really learn or practice my faith. It sounds like she had more of a community and foundation than I did. I never attended private religious school. I went to Sunday school off and on growing up, attended church for Christmas and Easter, maybe a baptism here and there, and also when someone died. Those are my experiences being in a church. She said she was exposed to Islam when she switched schools, and that's kind of how it started for me as well. I remember taking a world religions course in community college back in 2009, and that was my first ever exposure to Islam. I remember reading Surah al-Baqarah as part of my course material. My world religions professor was an atheist, very staunch atheist. He had a PhD in philosophy, and he was a huge source of inspiration for me. I remember when we covered Islam in class, and he said Islam means peace, and Muhammad closed the book of prophets, big finger quotes, closed the book of prophets. He said exactly this. I remember thinking, oh, wow, that's really interesting. I want to learn more about this, quote unquote, final revelation. Later on, I actually found out he was wrong about this. Islam means submission, not peace. Looking back now as a former Muslim, I know more about Islam than him, which is usually the case in academia. Unless you have a robust background in Islamic knowledge, you're going to have this very sanitized understanding of it. In an introductory class, professors are not going to teach you a critical view of Islam, so you only see one side of it. Anyways, my professor is still a brilliant man. He just lacked an in-depth understanding of Islam.
Yeah, so I actually studied religious studies for my A levels, which is like kind of the education you do just before you go to uni in the UK. I ended up taking a class called religious studies, which I thought was religious studies, but it was actually just Islamic studies. I don't know why they just didn't write Islamic studies, but I guess because of the UK curriculum, they had to label it as religious studies. So I ended up in this class, and it was just basically there was only like 5 non-Muslims in a class of like 30 students. And to be honest, I had never experienced the Muslim community before. And it struck me as being absolutely supportive, just so together. Like they just had this strong identity.
So, as I said, I took a world religions course, which was my first introduction to Islam. I also took a graduate level course in Islamic studies, and I also took a bunch of other religion courses in my undergraduate study as well. Overall, I was always very interested in learning about religion, and I spent many years of my life studying them formally and informally. My professor for my graduate course in Islamic studies was actually an older white man that was a pastor. That course was tough, to be honest. We covered a lot of material, and this professor was not trying to advertise Islam or his own religion. He was very neutral. I remember years ago, right when I converted, I listened to Hamza Sordas speak at a university. Before I went to this event at the university, I met up with my Islamic studies professor for lunch to talk about my decision to convert. He was teaching at another university in the area, and I remember him being supportive and saying that everyone has to find their own way in life. Also, she is right about the strong identity. It's something that you can literally observe in environments with a lot of Muslims. If it's a setting like university, all of them know each other and they stick together, especially if they are international students.
And in my case, it's quite important to note that I grew up in a household where I had a lot of issues. Not that I can really go into them here, but I had a lot of problems growing up, and I had issues around my own identity, and I didn't really have a happy childhood. Definitely didn't have happy teenage years. I mean, my teenage years were really bad for me, like I said, for a multitude of reasons. Um, so I didn't feel like I really belonged with my own family. And as anyone who understands trauma and abuse would know that that's going to create like, issues around identity and having a stable sense of self. And that definitely happened to me. I had no true sense of self.
Ellie, I'm sorry about your childhood and teenage years. I feel like after going through a lot in life, many people are seeking that sense of belonging and community. The Muslim community feels like the answer to that for a lot of converts. So it makes sense to feel drawn to being a part of something where you feel like you have another family and set of friends.
Discovered when I saw Muslims in my class, like we would have discussions on things like euthanasia, and they would all have the same opinion. Like nobody had different opinions, which I found really at that age, because I didn't have a lot of knowledge about the world yet. I thought the fact that they all thought the same way and they all had this wonderful like sense of togetherness. Like when we talk about euthanasia in class, they would all just say like it's wrong because Allah says it's wrong. And that was just the genuine sentiment, and there was no wiggle room. Everybody thought the same way. And I was really impressed by that in my young, impressionable mind, because I was used to in my Catholic school, we had atheists in our class, like not everyone thought the same way. And all of this was building this really strong profile in my mind that this is like almost like a kind of gigantic family.
It's also a flaw because it means you can't think outside the box. Everyone has to comply with the official Muslim dogma. Scientific ideas like evolution are scorned, even amongst practicing Muslim pharmacists and some doctors. Euthanasia is wrong because Allah said it's wrong. but cousin marriage is all right, despite how bad it is for humanity. Muslims are very good at marketing this by saying Islam is a complete way of life, and everything is lined out for us how to live, think, act, and so on. It almost feels comforting. There is some level of predictability with how people are going to think and behave. As you can see in this source, it's very important to know about wiping your butt with stones. That sounds very uncomfortable and painful, but, anyways.
And it was so attractive to me. Another thing was that I'd always been taught by society that the hijab was like something that they were forced to wear and like, those typical stereotypical tropes you just think. But then I saw the girls in my class were like, they were like fashionable with their hijab and they were actually wearing it and they encouraged each other to wear it. And once again, it was a strong marker of identity that I was so attracted to.
That's so interesting because that was attractive to me as well. Actually, one of the friends I made was a beautiful Palestinian girl. She was beautiful and smart. The way she wore her hijab was mesmerizing to me. To this day, I still do not understand how she wore it so perfectly. It looked like it was just part of her head. There were no creases on the top of her head. The tail of her hijab was neatly pinned to the side of her head. It was very elegant. There is a small correction here, though. Just because they wore it beautifully doesn't mean they wanted to wear it. Both things can be true. By the way, this same girl is no longer a hijabi. I looked at her LinkedIn a while ago to see what she was up to, and I was shocked to see she no longer wore the hijab. I even remember her telling me her mom said that the hijab is a precious part of the religion and she should always hold on to it. So it was jarring to see her without it. It just goes to show how women burn out from this religion, whether you're born into it or convert.
My teacher, who actually was a very, very lovely woman, and I would say she was one of the nicest people I ever met. And yes, she was Muslim. And she was, I'd say, a very spiritual Muslim. Like she was definitely not political at all, but she was very spiritual. And I had not been shown much kindness by people in my life. I had friends that I knew, but from adults, I didn't really have anyone as I could look to. And she was one of the first people who just showed me kindness. And it made such an impression on me. And with Islam, everything good obviously comes from Allah, according to Muslims. So when you meet such a wonderful person, they will attribute that to Islam. When you see the togetherness, when you see the community, they attribute it to Islam. Now, I was too young, I guess, to really understand the multifaceted reasons why somebody is such a nice person. It makes someone a good person. It's not just one thing. But at that point, I don't think I was old enough to really understand that. So I just went with it. I was like, wow.
Yes, I know what she's talking about. These were some of my first experiences with Muslims, like being invited over to their houses for Eid, etc. I believe one of the first hijabs I was ever gifted was from a Muslim I met at my community college. I can't remember if she gifted me hijabs before or after I converted, but I remember going over to her house and she took me to her room where she had a bunch hanging up and she just gave me a few like it was nothing. The kindness makes you think something, like maybe this religion has something in it that others don't. But like anything else, you realize that people are people. These same people who do nice things for you are also not perfect people. They're people who just follow a different religion. People who are taught they'll get something better if they give you something. That's it.
But being Catholic, I had that problem in me that I was like, hold on a second. These people don't think Jesus is the Son of God. These people think Prophet Muhammad is the best man of all time. Whereas I had grown up to believe that Jesus was like God incarnate, God walking on earth. And that admiration and love I had for Jesus came from like a genuine place in my heart. Growing up Catholic, any Catholics out there would understand that. Literally in school, they would not make us, we would cry every Easter over the crucifixion. We would do passion plays. And I would say the love and admiration Catholics have for Jesus, for Mother Mary, for the saints, wow, it's powerful.
This was something that I did not give much thought to when I converted, like the fact that whether or not Jesus was the Son of God should be questioned. I kind of bought into the marketing that Jesus was just a messenger, and how can there be three in one, aka the Trinity. The one thing that really made me question Islam, though, in this regard, was the fact that the crucifixion of Jesus was the most historically accurate part of his life. When I started to watch content from ex Muslims and people like David Wood, I learned that Muhammad was known as the ear.
It seems that Muhammad simply took a bunch of the beliefs and practices that were popular in 7th century Arabia, gave them an Islamic twist, and incorporated them into his new religion. The pagans, by the way, thought this was hilarious. They regularly made fun of Muhammad for believing everything he heard, so they called him the ear.
Whatever he heard from those around him, he plagiarized and copied it into the Quran. That's also how Islam started to fall apart for me. I realized that the things we find in Islam were in Syriac Apocrypha that Muhammad copied from, such as the Syriac infancy gospel, but he also blatantly made stuff up, such as saying God wanted him to marry Zainab, his adopted son's wife.
Kind of held me back, and I was like, no, I can't abandon Jesus, but Islam is looking really good. And then they would teach me about things like, the Quran has been perfectly preserved. And I was actually learning about this on my studies. Like, I was learning so much about Islam. Once again, those classic arguments that the Dawa people put forward. The Quran is perfectly preserved in comparison with the Bible, which is just, in their opinion, is just a mumbo jumbo. Nobody knows what's real. Nobody knows what's not. And these kind of things, before you really done a deep dive inquiry into it, seem quite logical. So not only that powerful emotional thing was going on in me, now the logical side, or so-called logical, was starting to play on my mind as well. Like, maybe they're right. Maybe this is the verbatim word of Allah, of God. Maybe this is true. Maybe this is God's actual speech via Angel Gabriel to Prophet Muhammad. And then it was, it's never been changed. And now I understand how that's not actually an argument for something being divine, but back then it kind of started making sense to me.
Oh man, I converted over 10 years ago, and this has always been a part of the Dawa playbook. They have a way of marketing Islam to be the religion that is supposed to be perfect. The Quran is unchanged, but it's such a lie. The truth is that this is just an illusion that the Dawa community has managed to maintain. Abdullah Gondal has done a deep dive showing just how badly preserved the Quran is on various channels if you want to see this. One video that got me thinking was a Yasser Qadi video about the holes in the narrative. It was the first time a big scholar admitted problems with the preservation narrative because of a leaked email he had written. You realize that you were being lied to by people who make significant amounts of money profiting off of Islam for a living. If you're going to sit there and say, well, ex-Muslims profit too, well, let's just say that people like Yasser Qadi, Omar Suleiman, and all of those guys will never, ever have to work a regular job ever again in their life. That's how much money they make. And even if we had the perfectly preserved book of some ancient text like the Code of Hammurabi, that doesn't mean it's from God. When I started watching my husband's videos before I met him, one of the videos that actually had me thinking was Yasser Qadi saying that the Quran predicts zombies. When people who never have to work or live in the real world tell you stuff like zombies are in the Quran, you should really question if they are telling you the truth. What do they have to lose? Nothing. What do you have to lose by believing? Your one and only life. They continue to make money and peddle lies while you're stuck wasting your time in this crappy religion. If you want to watch these videos and have a good laugh, I'm going to link them in the description. I wish I was lying about Yasser Qadi's zombie predictions, but I'm not.
And then there were just things like the kind of, that when you're a woman and they tell you that, like, Prophet Muhammad said that, heaven is under your mother's feet. Women are so venerated. There's a whole chapter in the Quran called Mary, which, as I said, being a Catholic, they know how to hook you in. Mentioning Mother Mary, that's going to hook you in. Um, and all of these little things. And looking back, it was almost like it was like breadcrumbing. Like they kind of give you these little bits, and they know the selling point, to reel you in. But then obviously it's not. There's always that kind of Islam sprinkled over it. Like they'll always attribute all these lovely things back to Islam.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. She is 100% right about this. The breadcrumbing and telling you this nonsense about heaven being under the mother's feet and Islam treats women so well. I was told all of these things myself, and I specifically remember being given a pamphlet from a Muslim friend that literally talked about women. I don't know if they still give pamphlets like these as a part of Dawa, but many years ago they did. They really try to make you believe that as a Muslim woman, you are so special and you're going to be treated like the most precious woman ever. But then there's so many other sources that contradict how women are treated. There are sources like this, which many of you are familiar with. This verse is about hitting women. You can hit your wife even if you fear a pushback or disobedience from her. There's also sources like this, where Aisha said that a woman was beaten so badly by her husband that her skin was as green as her clothes. She said she never met women who suffered more than the believing women. Also, there's just so many societal disadvantages to women in general, such as needing two female witnesses for one male, since she won't be believed as a woman. The rabbit hole gets so deep. Isn't this something you would want to know before converting to a religion? Like, how screwed you'll be when it comes to inheriting anything? Would you really want to be part of a religion that believes you deserve so little in the event your husband died?
So anyway, fast forward, I went away with my class. We went to Turkey, Istanbul, for a couple of days, because we were learning about. Actually, I don't know why. But anyway, we went to Istanbul and we visited like all of the wonderful buildings there. It was actually a fantastic trip. It was amazing. And once again, what we were being told was this is wonderful because you guessed it, Islam. And I came back from that trip. I mean, I think Istanbul's a really lovely city. I was actually shocked because it was quite modern, actually. The European side where we were staying was actually pretty modern, but it had that it's just a wonderful place to go. And I came back and I was just like, you know what, this to me is just wonderful. Like, I love it. But I wasn't ready really because I knew I was going to university. So I kind of wanted to enjoy university. So I looked into other things and I came to the conclusion that I was an atheist because I couldn't decide between Islam and Christianity. And the more I looked into it, I kind of just saw that, like, the more I researched religion, I started seeing holes in the logic of believing in a God. So I just left religion altogether. And I spent the years of my university, yeah, pretty much just having a great time.
Traveling is another way that women become exposed to Islam and develop some sort of affinity for it. They travel on their own or with their college. I went to Paris many years ago with my college, and I actually met a ton of Muslims there. I have been to China as well, where I was exposed to a big Muslim population they have in southern China. Story time, guys. When I went to Paris, we stayed with host families. And I remember one of the girls in my group actually stayed with a Muslim family. She was complaining because all of us would go out together at night, but she was forced to stay home because they had daughters that were not allowed out after a certain time. This girl in my group missed out on a lot of experiences, actually. But Turkey being nice doesn't mean Islam is true. Just like the beauty of Thailand doesn't make Buddhism true. Not to mention, when you're visiting as a tourist, everything seems so much nicer than it really is when you live there.
I moved abroad, came back, and I had a wonderful time. I worked while I was abroad, and then I came back because I had to for my university. So I should really explain that I have issues with all my trauma from my childhood and everything. For so long, I was just like on go, so that I didn't think about it. And when I came back to the UK, I had a complete like just breakdown, and I just was in a really bad place. I was very lonely at that point, and I couldn't go back to my family home for many reasons. And I was just desperate for a sense of family, a sense of belonging. And I started just going on dating apps to try and find someone. Very common thing to do when you have unresolved trauma. I ended up meeting someone, and this person happened to be Muslim, from a Muslim background.
Here we go. Islam often preys on women in transitional periods, as well as women who come from trauma. Please be nice in the comments, guys. People make mistakes, and she's just one of many women who made this mistake.
They told me that Islam was the answer to all of my problems. Everybody kept telling me it's because of the West why I had all these issues. And I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go for it, because I had worked so hard to like study and live the life I wanted to live. And I didn't realize at the time it was because of my mental health that I had the issues I had, and my childhood trauma and just things out of my control, that I was kind of unlucky in that way, I guess, that it all just got too much. And I really just needed time to work through what I was going through. But I didn't know that at the time. Just him, lots of people were saying to me, the reason you feel this way is because of the West. Like, the West is a broken place and Islam is perfect, and we don't have these issues in Islam. And all I could think of was those days when I kind of felt appreciated, wanted, the kindest people I'd ever met, the wonderful holiday in Turkey and everything. And I just thought, you know what? Maybe they're right. And I was desperate. So I just said, okay, maybe this is from God, because I feel so at home with these people, with the beliefs, everything. So yeah, I just decided to give it a go.
This is a very common mindset that Muslims impose on potential converts, that the West is this broken and problematic place. It's interesting, though, that the Muslims who say this are the same ones who are actually living in the West. Places like Syria, Iraq, Libya, etc., are all places that are broken from the bottom to the top. I mean, these societies are functioning at a very low level quality of life. The governments are corrupt and there's no social services available for disadvantaged people. They're ravaged by war. Different sects are always trying to kill each other. No matter where you go in the world, you're going to find issues with the place you're living in. Tell me in the comments what you think, guys. But what do you think about places like Qatar and Dubai? Are these some of the only Muslim countries with a good quality of life in comparison to others? Or am I missing something? If you like this video, subscribe to Friendly Ex-Muslim, as we have more such videos coming, and give a thumbs up for Ellie for being brave and sharing her story with the world. Also, check out her channel in the description.
And at first, you get this kind of rush of acceptance, and you just feel like, wow, like I've never felt so admired before. Everybody would just be congratulating me when I converted. Like, they would be saying, wow, like you've made the right decision. And I really just felt appreciated for the first time. So, like, just now I finally had a family. Now I finally had people to call my own. And very quickly, that all fell apart, because the same community that welcomed me with open arms then decided to start judging me like crazy. And I think when you convert to Islam, you convert for all the reasons I described. You know, you feel like, okay, this religion is perfect, it's perfectly preserved. Um, you know, all these things you're taught. But then when you start actually living the life, you realize that, oh, you know, this is not what I was kind of sold. This is so much different to what I thought it would be. And
I can confirm this happens. You get a lot of attention, praise, and validation for converting. You're especially admired as a white female convert. You feel like you're special, like Allah chose to guide you, and you're one of the few who was brave enough to embrace Islam and follow the quote unquote truth. This is how it goes. You're given breadcrumbs of what Islam is about, you convert, And you start to realize that this so called perfect religion has a lot of issues, both theologically and socially. Once you convert, though, that's when the pressure starts to be applied to quit your job, leave your spouse if he's non Muslim, wear the hijab, and just start to dive into this new life you've adopted.
I mean, my life actually got even worse at this point. So I ended up kind of just blaming myself. And I was like, but if the religion is perfect, then it must be me, and I was just doing things on a surface level. I wasn't actually looking into the religion. I was just saying, it's me. It must be me. This religion is perfect. It's me.
I can't say that I started to experience problems right away, but if you had tried to tell me anything negative or questionable about Islam, I probably would have cut you out of my life. I remember when I started to wear hijab, a high school friend of mine, her mom saw me on social media wearing the hijab. This friend's mom ran into my mom at the grocery store, and she took it upon herself to ask my mom basically what the hell was going on with me. Like, why am I wearing this? And I remember feeling really disgusted and angry. And stuff like this only strengthened me in wanting to be Muslim even more. Back then, especially when I got married, there was absolutely no convincing me out of this religion. I had to learn for myself about the sources, as well as having a lot of negative experiences. Muslims tend to gaslight themselves when they have doubts. I'm the problem. It's me. They carry a lot of guilt when things go sideways with their experiences in Islam. I did. And it's all the same guilt that also kept me in Islam for way longer than I should have been. But after having endless negative experiences and realizing a lot of this toxic thinking and behavior comes from the religion itself, there comes a point where you can no longer justify it.
Um, and very soon people started saying stuff to me like, you should be wearing the hijab, you should dress modestly, you shouldn't be talking to those men. And I just started to get really judged, and I felt like I just couldn't do the things I used to enjoy. But then I'd say, well, I need to get closer to God, because that's obviously the shaitan. That's the devil whispering to me. So I did just that. I tried my hardest to get closer and research, but the closer I got and the more research I did, I started to uncover some really horrible things.
Some really horrible things. This is getting very interesting. What she is saying is true. They start applying pressure to you to conform not long after converting. I mentioned in my last video about niqab that converts have the most autonomy in this religion in the sense that they don't have a husband or family pressuring them. But I also mentioned that the community might pressure them. Well, now you have an example here. Ellie's story is one of many. Even converts who didn't leave will tell you about this whole concept of advising, aka policing other women in your community. This is actually part of the religion, advising and pointing out quote unquote wrongdoing by others in your community. Instead of minding your own business and leaving people alone, Allah commands you to annoy people and be in their personal business.
Maybe I should go back a little bit. There was always one thing that never sat right with me about Islam, and that was their kind of bad attitude towards dogs. Like, obviously, you can't keep a dog in the house in Islam because of the hadith that says wherever there's a dog in the house, angels will not come in. So that really used to kind of irk me, because I'd always grown up having dogs. I love dogs. My dad had a chocolate Labrador, and she was just, she really, really, helped me during that depressive stage I was talking about earlier. She was literally the only thing that would get me up and out the door every day, like taking her for walks and stuff. So it really never sat right with me, but I guess I kind of, as all things, I did cognitive dissonance and just convinced myself somehow that no, 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 there must be a logic behind it. And then I'd always say, well, at least you can keep a cat, but that's a different story.
I found this to be incredibly interesting, and you don't hear about this hadith bothering people too much. I mean, it is talked about, but I haven't heard this directly from an ex convert yet. So I figured this is worth talking about, and actually one of the main reasons I wanted to react to this video. This is something so basic in life to own a pet. If you provide a loving and safe environment for your pet, whether it's a dog, a cat, or a chinchilla, who truly cares what type of pet you choose? When your religion dictates what kind of pet you own and gives you the most absurd reasons, it's something that begs further questioning about the legitimacy of this religion. Dogs are so silly and goofy, and it's kind of hilarious to think that the presence of a dog like this in a home will actually drive angels away. I mean, what does that say about the power that Allah and angels actually have? If angels are intimidated and put off by a cute poodle or something. I actually own a toy poodle, and he's such a sweetheart. When you hear things like this, you realize this simply can't come from God. Muhammad most likely had bad experiences with dogs combined with superstition because we also know that he thought black dogs were devils that needed to be killed. There's also hadith like this. Dogs were considered najas, which means impure. If you touch a dog, you're supposed to wash yourself 7 times, but not if you touch a cow or a donkey. Muhammad was so weird about numbers. It is all so ridiculous.
But at some point, I guess I got brave enough to kind of sit there and say, hold on, let me actually look into this. Because sometimes when you're like, I don't know, but when your mind is telling you something isn't right, it's usually because it's something is wrong. I kind of just got brave enough to ask myself, like, is this actually true that like, you know, dogs are some sort of bad thing that prevents angels from coming in? And I found myself kind of going down this rabbit hole of researching it and seeing that this was, I guess, a sound hadith, and it was the general consensus that dogs cannot live in the house. So something happened in me, which was like I had two conflicting beliefs, and I couldn't hold both of them at the same time in my mind. So on one hand, I had this life experience knowing that dogs are life changing. Like they actually make people's lives better in so many ways. And they have had human evolution. They were the first domesticated animals. So that was something I actually knew to be true. I had experience of that. And then on the other hand, I had the kind of so-called verbatim word of God and the example of the best man ever telling me that these animals were not to come in the house because they prevent angels from coming in.
So well said. Dogs have been by our side for thousands of years, one of the first animals to be domesticated. Man's best friend, they're loyal protectors, natural alarm systems, and even risk their lives to defend us. They'll protect you from wild animals, help herd livestock, and even save your drowning kids in a lake. But yet, somehow in Islam, they're considered impure. If something seems wrong, you need to listen to your gut. I started getting these feelings that something was off about so many things in Islam, but I continued pushing them down for years. I kept saying things to myself like, maybe I need to give the masjid another chance. Maybe I haven't found the right community. Maybe I can get past these doubts and ignore some of these sources. You try to make sense of this decision you made based on the lies you were told about Islam versus the real Islam you learn about after you already converted and spent time in this way of life. For me, the doubts continued to scream louder, and I noticed so much in my life was wrong because of Islam. And it got to a point where I could no longer do this. I had two conflicting worldviews. On one hand, I had encouragement from friends of mine to stay in Islam, that Allah has a great plan for me. On the other hand, I had the reality of my life that played out for years. Ultimately, I realized in order to ever be happy again, I had to find the strength and courage to leave Islam behind for good.
And at this point, I guess I had to give up one belief set. And if I gave up that belief about dogs, and there were many things like this is just one example. But if I gave up that belief on dogs, it was almost like I was lying to myself and I was deluding myself, like gaslighting myself. And I thought, you know what? I can't. So I was like, either one of these are not true. And I had, as I said, I had many problems like this. when I found out about the marriage to Aisha, who was a child, once again, there's no way you can justify it. So once again, if you say like, well, this example, is wrong, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, the whole Aisha thing is probably one of the worst realities about Islam. Being a mother to a little girl, I remember just imagining her being married off at 6 years old. Like how short Aisha's childhood was. I can't accept a religion that only allowed a little girl like Aisha to be a child until she was 6 years old. Then it was over for her. It's like the problems with Islam, they start to snowball. You find one thing wrong, then another, and another, until it's this giant ball of snow rolling down a mountain. It's like an avalanche.
Obviously, I had no one to talk to about this in real life. I had no one to ask all these questions to, all these doubts I was having. So I went onto YouTube. I went to the internet, shake Google, and I decided to type in, did Prophet Muhammad really marry a 6-year-old child? That's how I discovered the ex-Muslim community and figures who were so vocal and outspoken about these same doubt I had, but they had the answers and they had the proof. And then I started discovering even more stuff that the Prophet had done in his lifetime. And I just started to, that profile of the perfect man really started to fall apart.
Yep. I can confirm this is how it starts to unravel. Muslims never provide satisfying answers to your doubts. Hearing Muslims talk doesn't help because the worldview they're working with is so limited to only defending a 7th century man that did a lot of terrible things. I get that's what they're going to do because they believe Muhammad was perfect and did no wrong, but we can find so many examples of Muhammad being an imperfect person.
And yeah, there were just so many things. Slavery, the hatred towards polytheists and the hatred towards the LGBTQ community, the racism, the supremacy. And some people would say, you can't leave, these are all moral arguments and morality is objective. But actually, I was like, hold on, morality is important. Trying to be the best person you can is important because it reduces suffering for other people. And if you're someone like myself who's been through a lot of suffering in ways, especially when I was a child, I know that it's so important to have that morality. And if God was loving and kind, he would not encourage those things. He wouldn't make those things divine and sanctify them.
The racism and supremacy is very much a part of the Islamic culture. I know that Black converts in particular have a much harder time than others. In general, I hate to say it, but there is a lot of racism against Black people that you see from born Muslims. It's more difficult for Black converts to find suitable marriage prospects as opposed to white converts. But I will say that both do have a difficult time in general. Also, this racism can also emerge against white converts as well. As much as Muslims will applaud and welcome a white convert, they won't want their sons marrying you. However, you do serve as a good propaganda piece for why the West has fallen, showing how much white people want to run away from this and embrace Islam. Now, there are many cases where white converts marry interracially. I did the first time I got married, but trust me when I say that didn't happen without a lot of pushback. In a lot of these cultures, the mother will want to pick a wife for her son. When I got married the first time, I was 29. There were a lot of issues regarding my age, like being too old, as well as coming from a non Muslim background. This may have something to do with fertility, but to be honest, I got pregnant immediately after I got married. So, what does that say about my age and not being fertile enough? It doesn't say anything. It means nothing.
And I just very quickly, as I said, everything started to unravel. Everything just fell apart for me. And before I knew it, I said to myself, I just don't think I believe in this anymore. I just can't hold on to this. And I think being a convert, there's a natural privilege that we don't have. Well, most of us, I'd assume, we don't tend to have that huge family behind us that's trying to keep us in the faith. But I kind of just quietly left the room and I just decided to not tell anyone, like in my in-laws and stuff, because I was like, no, I don't want to cause trouble for myself, because I knew how passionate these people were about the faith.
I know I haven't explicitly told my story of why I left on here, and maybe I will one day, but this is kind of how it happened for me, more or less. Something happened to me that I felt was very scummy and unjust. And a light switch quite literally went off in my head. That's how I always describe it. It was a light switch. It just, this one event just flicked the light switch up, and that was it. That was what I needed. The cognitive dissonance that I was pushing in the back of my mind for many years instantly evaporated when this thing happened, and that was it. I knew that this was it, and I finally had this physical, tangible proof that my daughter and I didn't mean anything to anyone in this religion. It was all a facade, and I quietly walked away as well. A few friends knew, but no one was trying very hard to get me back. Even if they did, I made my decision and there was no going back, ever.
And I'd say as well, so many other reasons for me leaving were down to, I guess, the way I was treated, because people were being racist to me because I'm white. They were literally, oh, because I look white. I got sick and tired as well of hearing people say that, like, Western women are basically immoral and they wear basically no clothes, and we're so wonderful because we're modest. And it really started to offend me at some point, because I was like, but hold on, I grew up in this culture. Like, my family dressed like that, my friends dress like that, and I don't think they're any worse than me or you. But there was just such this supremacist attitude that really started to put me off.
This kind of rhetoric is common in many Muslim spaces, comparing their women to Western women, often painting a very black and white caricature of both. I used to buy into it too. The idea that Muslim women are pure, dignified, and family oriented, while Western women are immoral, promiscuous, and lacking self respect. But over time, like Ellie, I started getting very annoyed hearing the same reductive stereotypes repeated over and over. White women this, Western women that. It's as if they believe all Western women are just mindless, hedonistic party girls who will sleep with the first man they meet. There's no nuance, no recognition of the fact that women in the West, just like anywhere else, come from different backgrounds, values, and cultures. It's a lazy, reductionist way to prop up Islam by vilifying others. Ironically, it reveals more about the insecurities of those making these claims than it does about Western women themselves.
I guess I always say Islam has a very good PR, has very good marketing, and it's very good at drawing people in, and it's very good at making a case for itself. But when you live the reality, it's a different story. And when you find out more than just the surface, fluffy stuff, it's something you just, if you're, it's something it's very hard to cling on to. And I also want to caveat that and say that I still believe lots of Muslims who I meet are wonderful people, great people. I know them still, and I wouldn't say a bad word about them. And I really don't think they know their religion as well as, like, the critics of Islam. I really think they are on that surface level. And I think they're taught to not follow their doubts from a very young age. So that stops them from that further inquiry. And that's why the internet has literally just changed the game, because now things that people didn't know about, and I generally don't think people do, now these things are becoming more common to know about, and just so easy to access and research, all the negative things.
Islam is very good at marketing itself and presenting itself as the answer to every question in life: how to live your life, how to prepare for life after death, etc. I used to believe this was the answer and the most perfect way to live one's life. But when you compare this kindness and what have you that Muslims preach and live to the history of Islam and the sources of Islam, it doesn't compute. There's something off here about the way Islam wants to establish a society that makes you realize if you lived in a real deal Sharia environment, that life would actually be very miserable. There are still 2 billion Muslims in the world, many of who believe this to be the divine, inspired word of God. But we know better, so we have to keep saying the truth loudly and clearly to all who want to hear it, and those who don't.
Um, and I actually think that's a healthy thing because people should be able to make informed decisions about huge choices like joining a religion or continuing to be religious. But I think we should be allowed to speak about why we disagree with certain religions and historical figures. We should definitely be allowed to discuss that. Just because people hold someone in admiration and high regard, it doesn't mean they're off limits for discussion, especially if the things they did are considered to be like the worst of the worst in our society and in our culture. And that's where I'm kind of at now. I do share my story whenever it's safe to, like in real life. I would never encourage anyone to like, because it's actually dangerous. That's the thing. It's dangerous to speak out about these things in so many places in the world. But wherever you're safe and able to do so, I think the discussion should definitely continue and actually should go to even a more public place because we need to be able to criticize like any religion, any ideology, and share our experiences, whatever those experiences might be.
Ellie is right. People should be able to make informed decisions about what kind of major life changes they make, such as converting to another religion. Now, because of Islam, I have a beautiful daughter that I love and cherish more than anything in this world. I would never change that at all, ever. Because of my daughter, I became very irresponsible. Immediately after she was born, I had this maternal instinct that I never knew I had. I never grew up around babies or knew anything about them until I had one, but my daughter helped make me who I am today. However, on the flip side of things, I realized that by leaving Islam, I am saving my daughter from a lot of the potential pain and heartache I experienced in this religion. I am saving her from not knowing a life without hijab or being pressured to be a certain way for this religion. I saved my daughter from the stigma of divorce and ever knowing what it means to be a young widow in this religion. I saved my daughter from only having Muslim men to choose from. She has the freedom to choose a good man from any religion or ethnic background that she wants. She is not going to be bound and limited by the rules Muhammad and Allah made 1400 years ago. These are the conversations that need to be had. If you have a story or experience, put it out there in the world, if you're able to. Guys, I'd like to hear your thoughts or experiences in the comments. Are you a former convert or questioning convert? Do you know someone who converted and left, maybe a friend or family member? I will be thoroughly going through the comments here, and if you'd like, I can highlight yours and make a video response giving you a voice, along with my thoughts and perspective.
And that's just my little rant. But yeah, over time, you know, I ended up just leaving the whole thing, um, even leaving the relationship, just everything, because I realized that the lie that had been sold to me that Islam is a quick fix for all your problems was not true. And it was also not true that the West was to blame for my life. It's a multifaceted reason why things go wrong. And through leaving Islam, I was actually forced to do the work on myself and to go inside and try to introspect rather than try and make it about something else. And yeah, so that was my journey. This is a very quick summary of it, but that was my journey in and out of the religion.
Ellie's story is one of many, but what makes it so powerful is that it highlights a reality that Muslims rarely acknowledge: the experience of converts who leave. Islam is excellent at marketing itself as the ultimate truth, drawing in converts with promises of peace, structure, and a sense of belonging. But as Ellie's journey shows, the reality often doesn't live up to the ideal. The pressure, the expectations, the contradictions, it all starts to pile up until the doubts become too loud to ignore. If you like this video, please subscribe and join our Patreon to support me and my husband in making more such videos. We can use your help. This is Mrs. Friendly Ex-Muslim, signing out.